Welcome back. Now we're going to talk about the lower GI tract, which includes your small intestines, your large intestines, as well as the lower accessory organs in the abdominal cavity, your liver, gallbladder, and pancreas. So here's a figure that shows the different structures. Here you see the liver, gallbladder, and pancreas. These are your accessory organs. And then over here you can see the duodenum, which actually attaches right here at the pyloric sphincter to the stomach, which would be over here. And then the duodenum, which is a small region, runs into the jejunum of the small intestines, and then that runs into the ileum of the small intestines. The ileum of the small intestines runs into the cecum, which is the first part of the large intestines, at this region called the ileocecal valve, which is another sphincter that controls movement of food from the ileum into the cecum. So then you have the large intestines, which is an ascending, transverse, and descending colon, sigmoid colon, rectum, and anus. Small intestines is a tube that's actually very long, but is very, not very wide. So the lumen is much smaller than the large intestine lumen. And that's where it gets its name, is from the size of the lumen. This is where the majority of absorption occurs. We absorb almost all of the nutrients. We absorb the majority of our water, electrolytes, and vitamins in the small intestines. The first part of the small intestine is the duodenum. Duodenum attaches to the stomach at the to the pylorus of the stomach at the pyloric sphincter. The duodenum then runs into the jejunum. The jejunum is the most the main area for absorption of nutrients. This is where chemical digestion and absorption occurs. So we have this long brush border of enzymes in the wall of the small intestines, and every time material hits those enzymes, chemical reactions occur, and then nutrients can get absorbed. The ileum is the last part of the small intestines. There's still absorption occurring here, but not as much as in the jejunum. And it ends at that ileocecal valve, which I talked about. That valve, or that sphincter, controls movement of materials. So this is what the small intestines kind of looks like. You have those two layers of smooth muscle. You have the inner epithelial layer, or endothelium, is going to be simple columnar epithelium with a nice thick, or with a lot of goblet cells to produce a lot of mucus. And this epithelium forms what we call circular folds. So think about when you're driving, say, to drop off your kid at school, and they have those little speed bumps to slow you down. It's kind of what these circular folds do. So as the chyme moves, it slows down when it hits these bumps. On top of those circular folds, we have tiny little villi. Villi are finger-like projections that increase the surface area. Within those villi, we also have capillaries, lymphatic capillaries called lacteals. Lacteals help us to absorb the fatty materials, lipid-soluble materials, so that we can then utilize those nutrients. And there you can see the circular folds even better with those villi sitting out on each of them. On top of the villi, we have more tiny extensions called microvilli. Microvilli increase surface area even further. And this is important because we need a lot of surface area to absorb all the nutrients that we just took in. Within the microvilli, we have enzymes called brush border enzymes that help to digest chemically those nutrients, and then we can absorb them more effectively. The stomach lining, those simple columnar epithelial cells, make up different structures. So some of those cells make up intestinal glands that secrete intestinal juice, which is an alkaline substance that helps to decrease the acidity or bring the pH of the substance back to a more neutral. So we have goblet cells that make up those intestinal glands. Goblet cells produce an alkaline mucus that protects and lubricates. We have submucosal glands that produce more alkaline mucus to protect the duodenum from the acidic environment that the chyme produces. We have unicellular glands that produce enzymes to break down proteins. And we have enteroendocrine cells that produce hormones. The main hormone we talk about is cholecystokinin, which slows down stomach activity, stomach motility, and causes us to feel full. Here are those different cell structures. You can see them within that stomach lining. And you can see the little brush border and all that stuff. So the stomach moves in the intestines have two different activities for movement. They move materials from one section of the intestine to the next section through peristaltic waves, and then they move materials back and forth within a section through a process called segmentation. The gastroileal reflex is a reflex that occurs when more materials have entered the stomach. So if you eat breakfast, say at 7 in the morning, then around noon or 1 you're putting something into your stomach for lunch. That material is now in the breakfast material that you ate is now in that small intestines. And the movement of materials into the stomach initiates this gastroileal reflex to kind of get rid of the food that's in the small intestines so that the stomach material can enter the small intestines when it's ready. This occurs at the ileum of the small intestines to the cecum. There's an ileocecal sphincter that I showed you before that normally is closed, but it'll open during this gastroileal reflex. And so here you can see those peristaltic waves moving materials towards some organ. So if this is in the esophagus, this is moving it towards the stomach, so a bolus. But if it was, say, chyme, it might be moving towards the cecum of the large intestine. And then this is that mixing process where materials are moving back and forth until we have effectively broke down and we're able to absorb the majority of the nutrients. Small intestines also has, or I should say the duodenum of the small intestines, also takes in secretions from the 3 accessory organs, the liver, gallbladder, and the pancreas. So the liver and gallbladder sit together. Liver produces bile. It has all kinds of other functions as well, but it produces bile. Bile then is stored in the gallbladder and released when necessary into the small intestines. The pancreas also produces a lot of secretions that move into the small intestines. They share a common duct. So here you have that cystic duct here, and then over here you have you have your hepatic ducts, and then right here you see the pancreatic duct. They're going to merge here, and they're going to release materials down into the duodenum of the small intestines. So let's look at each organ individually. The liver is one of the largest organs in the abdominal pelvic cavity. So it's a huge organ. You've seen it in the rats. It takes up half their abdominal cavity. You've also seen it in the pig. It's a very large organ. There are 4 lobes to the liver. So we have a right lobe and a left lobe, a caudate lobe and a quadrate lobe. So the left and right are separated by the falciform ligament. The caudate, or the quadrate lobe right here is by the gallbladder, and then you have the caudate lobe right here. A hepatic artery carries oxygen-rich blood to the liver. A hepatic portal vein brings nutrient-rich but oxygen-poor blood to the liver from the intestines. And then we have the hepatic vein takes the nutrient-poor, oxygen-poor blood away from the liver to the inferior vena cava. So when you look at a lobule, so the cells of the liver are called hepatocytes, and they form functional units called lobules. These lobules each have a bile duct, a hepatic portal vein, and hepatic artery all together. So you can see that right here, and then we have the central vein. And so these cells are producing bile. They're also helping to detoxify materials that are moving into the liver, and they are going to be working to store or to prepare materials for leaving the liver. Bile then is produced by the liver, but it is going to be stored in the gallbladder. Bile itself contains mainly water, bicarbonate, which helps to increase the pH, bile salts, which help to break down fats through a process called emulsification, cholesterol, which is a significant portion of bile, mucin, and lectin. When the liver is functioning properly and when it's healthy, it does a lot of work for our body, but if the liver gets damaged, that can affect our body depending on the amount of liver that is damaged. So here we have a healthy liver, and here we have cirrhosis. Cirrhosis of the liver can be caused by viruses, or it can be caused by serious injury to the liver, but it also can be caused by alcohol. And that's where that picture comes from. Cirrhosis can lead to jaundice, where we're not able to break down hemoglobin properly. It can lead to edema because the liver produces those proteins like albumin, which increase colloid osmotic pressure. Can lead to pain and other problems, and will lead to death if the entire liver does not function properly. The next organ then is the gallbladder. The gallbladder is a tiny little sac that hangs on the inferior side of the liver. It functions to store and concentrate bile. That's its main function, and it's going to release the bile directly to the common bile duct, which then leads to the small intestines, the duodenum of the small intestines. So we're producing bile all the time, and that bile is then going to be stored and concentrated until we have a meal, and then that bile is going to be released into the small intestines so that we can break down those fats. The majority of the bile that we release actually is reabsorbed. Only a small amount of the bile that we produce is excreted in feces. This is one way of getting rid of extra cholesterol, by getting rid of the bile, because bile is composed or has a lot of cholesterol in it. A disorder associated with the gallbladder is called gallstones or cholelithiasis. Gallstones are very painful. They can get caught in that common bile duct and block that duct. And when that happens, you get serious pain, typically in that right shoulder to the right back, right underneath your scapular region. It can lead to so much pain that you can hardly breathe at times. I mean, it's very painful. Obesity, age, sex, these are all risk factors for having this disorder. So if you are a female, overweight, and typically if you're older, you tend to be more prone to these. Though I'm female, and I had just given birth to my first child, so I was probably overweight at the time, but I was only 18 years old, and I had my first case of gallstones. So I ended up having my gallbladder taken out when I was 20 years old. The process to remove the gallbladder, they used to have to cut open the entire abdominal cavity. Now they use laparoscopic surgery. They make small incisions, and then they use video camera to guide them so that they can just cut that gallbladder directly out. They can also just break up the stones, but I was so young, and they said if you're having it already, then you're going to just have more problems when you're older, so they got rid of my gallbladder when I was very young. The next organ then is the pancreas. The pancreas, or the last organ I'll talk about in this video, is the pancreas, and this is an organ that we talked about in the endocrine system because it produces some very important hormones, but it also has exocrine functions. So exocrine functions include releasing pancreatic juice, producing and releasing pancreatic juice that contains multiple digestive enzymes that then move through the pancreatic duct to the duodenum. And so again, here's that bile duct, here's the pancreatic duct, and then they share this opening where they release directly into the duodenum. So materials that are released into the duodenum include bicarbonate ions that increase the pH of the small intestine because chyme is so acidic. We also have pancreatic amylase, pancreatic lipase, so digesting starch, digesting fats, proteases, which digest proteins, and nucleases for nucleic acid digestion. And the pancreas secretes cholecystokinin also. So we have cholecystokinin being produced by the small intestines as well as by the pancreas, and this decreases our appetite, inhibits stomach motility, activates the gallbladder, and causes our stomach to stop functioning or stop contracting and churning so much. Secretin, which is actually produced in the small intestines, activates the pancreas and the liver, so it kind of stimulates them to release alkaline materials so that we can neutralize the acidic chyme that's entering into the small intestine. So it gets secreted in response to that acidic environment. I'm going to stop here, and the next video will be the last video for the digestive system. Bye.